We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Vav Amid Beis in Meseches Baba Kamma. This is Baba Kamma Daf 76b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said that if a ganav steals an animal that is hektish, but it's kachem shechayev bachro yusan, it is possible to be chayev dalid v'hei if you slaughter such an animal. And so the Gemara asked, how can that be possible? Isn't that a shchita she'ena ru'uya? Because the animal is a carbon, and you're shechting the animal outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Yochanan, on the previous summit, the Gemara brought two versions of Rabbi Yochanan's answer that essentially said, you're shechting it inside the Beis HaMikdash, and we're talking about an animal without a blemish, and that's why it's considered to be a shchita ru'uya. And the Gemara now continues, Reish Lakish Amar, and Reish Lakish says, B'shochet bali mumin bachutz. The case could be where you're shechting the animal, but it has a blemish, and you're shechting it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and again, that would be considered to be a shchita ru'uya. And Rashi explains, bali mumin shchitasan heter bachutz. Again, that's considered to be, if you shecht it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, as long as you redeem the animal, that's going to be a shchita ru'uya, and that could be the case Rabbi Shimon is discussing. And the Gemara asks, Tehiba Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar asks the following question on both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that you're shechting the animal within the Beis HaMikdash, and we're talking about an animal that does not have a blemish, it's an animal that's a carbon. Shchita materis, is it the shchita, is it the slaughtering of the animal that makes it mutter to eat from that animal? V'halo zrika materis, isn't it the throwing of the blood, the zrika, that is actually matter that animal? So that shouldn't be considered a shchita ru'uya. And similarly, the Reish Lakish, according to Reish Lakish, shchita materis, is it the shchita that makes it mutter? V'halo pediya materis, isn't it the redeeming of the animal when we're talking about an animal with a blemish that makes it mutter? And Rashi says, Tehi lashon meriach bekankan kamotila akankane kalamar dayik lo Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar inspected these answers, uparach, and he asked as follows: L'Ravin aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. According to Ravin's answer within Rabbi Yochanan, v'chi shchitaso materis, is it the shchita that makes it mutter? V'alo zrika materis, isn't it the throwing of the blood that makes it mutter? Uv'shas tvicha shchita she'ena ru'uya, and therefore, at the time of the shchita, it should be considered a shchita she'ena ru'uya. That was the question. Rebbe Lazar had again a question both on Rabbi Yochanan and on Reish Lakish. And the Gemara says, Ishtemitze had Rabbi Shimon. When Rebbe Lazar asked this question, he forgot about the teaching of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said, Kol ha'omed lizro kezaruk dami. Anytime that you could do the zrika, it's as if the zrika was already done. So you don't actually need the zrika. V'chol ha'omed liftos, and anything that's ready to be redeemed, kepadoi dami, it's considered as if it is redeemed. And Rashi explains, Ishtemitze Rebbe Lazar, it escaped from Rebbe Lazar, Hadal Rabbi Shimon, Kol ha'omed v'chulu, that teaching of Rabbi Shimon, that again, Kol ha'omed lizro kezaruk dami, and Kol ha'omed liftos kepadoi dami. And Rashi notes, V'chol ha'omed liftos, when we're talking here that it is omed liftos, it means ubale mumin kifduyim damu. When you have an animal with a blemish, that's as if it's already redeemed, hoel v'sofan l'kach, since that is going to be the end. In the end, it will be redeemed. And Rashi notes, Uvavale mumin meikar naskin. We're talking here where the animal had a blemish from the outset. The ibisha kadam hekdeshin is mumin, because if the case was that first it was made hekdesh and then it developed a mum, sulo chazu lepidyon, so then mishanishchatu, then you're not going to be able to redeem it once it's been shechted. Teshamina leilu Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish aliv de Rabbi Shimon v'shmaita basraisa de Meseches Tamura, because Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, according to Rabbi Shimon in the last sugya of Tamura, kadshe mizbeach bechlal hamod v'arachu mishanishchata eino yechol lamod aval bebal mumei karo mode. Again, in such a situation, you're not able to redeem such an animal only if it was a balmum from the beginning before it was made into hekdesh, then you can redeem it after the shchita. And the Gemara continues, Kol ha'omed lizro kezaruk dami. Where do we see that Rabbi Shimon holds Kol ha'omed lizro kezaruk dami? The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Shimon says, Yesh noser, there is leftover carbon, shu metame tomas ochlin, which could be metame tomas ochlin. V'yesh noser, and you also have a carbon that's noser, she'eno metame tomas ochlin, which is not metame tomas ochlin. And the brayso explains, Ketzad, how so? Lon lifnei zrika, if it becomes leftover, if it becomes noser before the zrika, eino metame tomas ochlin, so then it's not metame tomas ochlin. La'achar zrika, but if it becomes noser after the zrika, after the throwing of the blood, metame tomas ochlin, then it is metame tomas ochlin. The kaimalon, and we've established, my lifnei zrika, what does it mean that it becomes noser before the zrika? It means kodem shenira l'zrika, it means before it's possible to do zrika. And la'achar zrika, what does it mean after zrika? It means la'achar shenira l'zrika, after it's possible to do zrika. And the Gemara says, Kodem shenira l'zrika lon mahi. What does it mean that there was no possibility to do zrika and it became noser? That means delo haveshos biyom lemizraki. It means you have a situation where you shechted the animal in such a way where there wasn't enough time to do do zrika, and it already became noser. The shachte samach l'shkias achama, meaning he shechted it near the time of sunset. V'yeno metame tumas ochlin, and in such a case, it's not going to be metame tumas ochlin. And la'achar shenir l'zrika, if it's after it's possible to do zrika, lon, then it becomes noser. That simply means the havashos biyom lemizrike. There was enough time in the day to do the zrika, and then we say metame tumas ochlin. Then we say it is metame tumas ochlin. And what do we see from this? Alma, we see from this kala omid lizro kazaruk dami, that if there was time, if it was ready that you could do this zrika, that's considered a kazaruk. That's the whole point of this explanation of the brisa. And similarly, v'kala omid liftos kepadoi dami. Where do we see that Rabbi Shimon holds kala omid liftos kepadoi dami? The Tanyas we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Shimon says, and Rashi explains yesh noser shemetame. Again, there's some cases of noser which are metame tumas ochlin and some which are not. Rabbi Shimon, the rule according to Rabbi Shimon is as follows: Isurei hana, anytime it's prohibited to get benefit from the food, ein metamin tumas ochlin, then that food is not able to become tamei tumas ochlin. The dorish mikol ochel asher yeyachel, he darshans that from the pasuk ochel shata yachol lahachilo laacherim. It has to be food that you could feed to others. O lenachri, o liYisrael, whether to a non-Jew or a Jew. Kare ochel, only then it's called ochel, only then it's called food. Beperek Kamma de bechoros. That's what we say in the first parak of bechoros. And so therefore Rashi says, Vim haisalah shas heter hana, if there was a moment of a heter hana, mishenishchata, from the time it was slaughtered, yarda olav din kabbalas tuma, so then it will have this halacha of kabbalas tuma. Ve'afilu neser la'acharkein, even if it becomes prohibited later on, mekabelas tuma, it's still going to be mekabel tuma. And so therefore, lon lifnei zrika, if it becomes noser before zrika, kachim hanifsalin lios noser b'layla achas, talking about kachim that even in one night they become noser, they become considered leftover. Could go in toda v'kachei kachim, for example, the carbon toda or kachei kachim, kulin, all kinds of kachei kachim. Im lo nizrak daman v'lo niter ba'achila, if you didn't do the zrikas hadam and you weren't allowed to eat it, ein metame tumas ochlin, that's not considered tamei tumas ochlin. V'kaim alon, and we've established b'perak hamenachos v'anesachim, the high lifnei zrika, that when we talk about lifnei zrika here, kodem shenira l'zrika kamer, it means to say that there was no possibility of zrika. To lo havale shows biyom, there was no time to do zrika. The lav omed lizrok biyom have, it wasn't considered ready to do the zrika that day. The leka lememar kizarak dami l'shavi ochla, because then you can't say kol omed lizrok kizarak dami if there was no time to do the zrika. But lon la'achar shenira l'zrika, but as long as there was some time to do zrika, to have a shows biyom that there was enough time to do it, ochlu, it's considered an ochel. Alma kizarak dami. You see again this idea that kol omid lizro kizarak dami, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph.